Hi folks, we're back and this is Cutting Through the Matrix, talking about how old the system is and how we've been manipulated and managed. It was much easier in the Middle Ages and right up really too. They gave us basic writing and arithmetic so that we could stack the factories with our bodies and be able to at least follow simple instructions and so on. It helped the managerial class if we did all the sums for them. But we were given a very minimalistic thing. And even at the time, in fact, when they gave the average person mandatory education, the minimalistic type, they gave penny novels out at the same time. And the penny novels were great distractions for working class people who lived a boring, drudgery life. And it kept their minds off looking at more serious things or even questioning higher learning and so on. That's why they flooded the market with these things. So we've always been managed. And even then, since you've gone through school and so on, you don't realize that there are special schools and special universities. That's the Ivy League universities. And then you have the red brick universities, as they call them in Britain, that were meant for the working class types to go up into. And even amongst the Ivy League type, there's special selection committees up there to take certain people out into higher learning, which you don't hear about. And it's a very old system. It's been like this for an awful long time. Because you see, we're kept in the dark from real knowledge. We're not supposed to know what really is ever really going on in the world or the real reasons for anything happening at any time. We're managed. Again, neuroscience comes into it in a big way. And they have neuroeconomics, as they call it, which is manipulation of the mind to change the working class people or the majority of the bulk of the population and make them more malleable by their governing class. And it's to do with massive psychology for supposed economic reasons, altering your behavior to suit the government, not the other way around. That's all underway and working right now. It's been working for years. But it's a very old system. And I've mentioned before some of the top players who designed this present phase that you're going through, some of whom are dead now. And Bertrand Russell was one of them. And in 1931, he published this in the book, The Scientific Outlook, where he'd already gone through, mind you, about these different types of schools. He continues in pages 247. He says, the latest stage in the education of the most intellectual of the governing class will consist of training for research. Research will be highly organized and young people will not be allowed to choose what particular piece of research they shall do. Now that's a fact because I know guys who are in research. Some of them leave it because they feel so stymied when they get up against something that doesn't jive with what they're supposed to, but through these repeated experiments, they find out other things. And if they push it, they're gradually eased out the door, because they're not supposed to know the higher sciences. And this is what Russell is explaining here. He says, they will of course be redirected or directed to research in those subjects to which they have shown special ability. A great deal of scientific knowledge will be concealed from all but a few. There will be arcana reserved for a priestly class of researchers. That's real knowledge, the archives, who will be carefully selected for their combination of brains with loyalty. Loyalty to who? Loyalty to the system. They're betters, the party, as Orwell called it. One may, I think, expect that research will be much more technical and fundamental. The men at the head of any department of research will be elderly and content to think that the fundamentals of their subjects are sufficiently known. Discoveries which upset the official view of fundamentals, if they're made by young men, will incur disfavor, and if rashly published, will lead to degradation. Young men to whom any fundamental innovation occurs will make cautious attempts to persuade their professors to view the new ideas with favor. But if these attempts fail, they will conceal their new ideas until they themselves have acquired positions of authority, by which time they will probably have forgotten them, because now they're part of the established system. They'll know they're part of the ruling class, you see. That atmosphere of authority and organization will be extremely favorable to technical research, but somewhat inimical to such subversive innovations as have been seen, for example, in physics during the present century. There will be, of course, an official metaphysic, and then there's a religion for the public. A new one, of course, which is, of course, a greening thing and austerity and all that stuff, which will be regarded as intellectually unimportant but politically sacrosanct. In the long run, the scientific progress will diminish and discovery will be killed by respect for authority. In other words, you understand that the more that you think you're learning, they can just as easily over a generation remove all the learning until you're back in the dark ages. And you'll know all they want you to know. And you'll think you know it all. It's that easy. It is that easy. To remove knowledge. They've been doing it for a long time. That's what George Orwell called the memory hole. They just kept removing selected knowledge off the shelves. Now it's just blips and computers off the go. They're not there anymore. They're gone. And you're left with a new thing. So as the generation goes on and grows up, they get into a new system thinking that in fact, they're taught, isn't it amazing too, how youngsters are taught to think that they're actually more, they're superior to those who went before them. It's a fantastic scam, isn't it? Because most fall into it thinking, oh, well, yes, what these old folk know, I'm on the cutting edge. They have no idea that everything they're allowed to look at is put up there and authorized for them to look at, or it wouldn't be there. It's so easy to divert them off into all kinds of areas that do them no good whatsoever. But that's what we're living in, scientific socialism, on behalf of the extremely rich masters. Now that's the music coming again, so we're back after this break. Hi folks, this is Cutting Through the Matrix, and we're talking about really how it's so easy to control us en masse, really. Why bother trying to change the individual when the individual would change with the masses if they're all changing at the same time? And that's really how we judge our sanity. We toss the bits and bytes, I call it, bits and bytes of news that they give us between each other to see what the reactions are of those around. And if they give you the standard answers back that they've heard on television or wherever, and you've got the same idea, then you all say that you're sane. We all agree, so we must all be sane. And that's how simple it is to change the masses. Why waste your time changing a person here or there? It's much more effective to do it en masse. And in the impact of science and society, Russell worked with the biggest organizations on the planet to do with mind control for the masses, and he was authorized by presidents and prime ministers to help set out a system for the future world society and the different stages of it too, by using all of these techniques, including the language of mathematics, by the way. He was heavily involved in computers. He was also well in with members of the Vienna school, who already for centuries really, they had arcana of knowledge to do with mind control of the masses already. And then he joined the Macy group too. He's put there, also authorized on behalf of prime ministers and presidents to bring in this world socialist type society to really dominate the public. Anyways, he goes on to say here on page 62 of the same book, Fichte laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as his schoolmasters would have wished. But in his day, this was an unattainable ideal. What he regarded as the best system in existence produced Karl Marx. In future, such failures are not likely to occur where there is dictatorship, because diet injections and injunctions will combine, such as food injections and injunctions, will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable. And any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. Even if all are miserable, all will believe themselves happy because the government will tell them that they are so. So, you see, they're way, way ahead. And as I say, that was in the 30s and so on, that stuff came out. Way ahead of what you think. You think you're free because they tell you you're free. And you don't realize that pretty well everything that goes on in your head, all the topics that fill your mind, even the little quests in your brain that you go off on, are given to you by powers above you. They're even unaware exist. You think that you have your own thoughts. So diet, injections, and injunctions will produce a sort of character. But we live in an age where everyone thinks they're living in everything's free, and they're being taught to think that everything's free as you get led into the bigger cage, of course, because nothing in the world out there is free. Nothing. Nothing at all is free. Every program that you download on your computer has a catch to it, whether you know it or not, and it's all to do with monitoring you. And basically putting it in your little cluster, because we all belong to clusters apparently, with your habits and your social traits and the topics that you like, and the forums you join, even the clubs you might even actually physically go to. They keep track of all of this kind of stuff and the chit-chat between you and all your friends, as they say, so that they can put a personality profile out on you and have an ideal exact duplicate of you working in big institutions like the Pentagon. And I've read their official site when I went into that particular article, where they say there's an identical you for everybody in North America in a virtual reality. And all your updated data daily is taken with all your exchanges and added to it so that you can be predictable. And they run tests on virtual yous to see what you would do in different situations. You know, talk about managing society. It's a doddle, as they say. It's easy. It's very easy to manage society with the technology that's out there today. It's always been pretty easy, mind you. And in all ages, really, will be managed very, very well. We're taught all we need to know. Now, that's the music coming in, so I'll be back with tonight's topics after this break. Hi folks, I'm back and we're cutting through the matrix. You know, as I say, it will be managed down through the ages very, very well because the public are taught all they're supposed to know. And I mean supposed to know. Not just what they need to know, but what they're supposed to know. And there are terrific minds down through the ages too who helped kings and queens and in governments as advisors and on how to do it. These are arts that are very ancient. And of course there are archives. I touched on that last week. There are admitted archives that Bertrand Russell's talked about to himself, where he said that very few would get access to these particular archives. And that even in universities too, each branch of the university, each area, each specialized area would be run with elderly men who would keep it that way for the students coming up. And the students would simply do what they were told and do experiments which were already done so many times before. And that's what research is. You're searching what's already been done before. And of course these elderly men would make sure that you would go out into the world never knowing that there was sciences and experiments way beyond what you've been trying. And that keeps everything in a kind of status quo, because the elite themselves must keep the high technology and the high sciences to themselves. Otherwise they would lose power, lose control over the general public. Now, Russell said this as well in the impact of science on society. He said the completeness of the resulting control over opinion depends in various ways upon scientific technique. Where all children go to school and all schools are controlled by the government, the authorities can close the minds of the young to everything contrary to official orthodoxy. Printing is not possible without paper, and all paper belongs to the state. Broadcasting and the cinema, movies, are equally public monopolies. The only remaining possibility of unauthorized propaganda is by secret whispers from one individual to another. Now, he was also talking about what was already up and running when he wrote his book back in the 30s. And you had the Soviet system, of course, doing everything that's coming in here in the world now. It was already been tested out in the Soviet Union. You had the rise of Nazi Germany too, and all of the techniques were being used by both of these totalitarian powers because they were both socialist in structure. And socialism will always go this way. But it says here too, it says children at school are taught that it is their duty to denounce their parents if they allow themselves subversive utterances in the bosom of the family. No one can be sure that a man who seems to be his dearest friend will not denounce him to the police. The man may himself have been in some trouble and may know that if he is not efficient as a spy, his wife and children will suffer. All this is not imaginary, it is daily and hourly reality. Nor, given oligarchy, is there the slightest reason to expect anything else. Now, That's what we're living in today. I've gone through the Rees Commission in the past. I've gone through Norman Dodd's report. He talked about too. There's a documentary up in, or a video up in YouTube, I believe, with him talking about the commission. It was commissioned by the Congress to go in to investigate the non-profit organizations, the big foundations as they call them, to find out why they seem to be promoting and funding with incredible amounts of money the big so-called far-left associations and movements. Why would multi-millionaires, why would the biggest capitalists on the planet be funding what seemed to be the far-left movement that they thought, of course, in Congress and so on, is opposite? And they got close to the truth because some of the CEOs of the big foundations, like the Ford Foundation, admitted that they took their orders directly from the White House. And they also said, because the White House even then was run by the CFR, it comes from Foreign Relations, according to Carol Quigley. And they also said their job was to change the culture so drastically in America and in Europe that it would blend seamlessly with that of the Soviet Union. Eventually they'd come together in a third way, you see. And this is what we have now. We've got the blending of the two into this third way. And they had to have a war to kick it off, so they got the war on terror to kick it off and really go forward with it, because you can get more done under a war scenario with taking rights away from the public. Since I've tested all this before, even in World War II, in Britain and elsewhere, you can take all the rights from them, you can get them on rationing if need be, and the public will tend to obey and do what they're told. And there's less grumbling amongst them. So they needed a warfare scenario. Bingo, they got what they want because they make things happen. And the whole world is now under a form of totalitarianism. And the trick now is to keep the public in perpetual warfare scenarios where it's one thing after another. It's financial crashes, it's terrorist threats, it's one thing after another. And of course, all correspondence is monitored exactly as Russell talks about. And even when you whisper to someone, you wonder if there's a third ear somewhere, because there's so much gizmos and gadgetry out there. You never know. I read an article recently where the Pentagon had put in a massive order for all these little drones, spy drones. Some of them apparently they're working on look like birds. Literally look like birds. They can sit on your telegraph wire and listen in and follow you, even up corridors and so on. That's the world they're bringing in. And everyone out there will think, well, they won't bother me, I'm not important. Well, you understand, everyone is a variable in this big system. Every single person out there is a variable. That's why they want you to be putting all your data up on the net every day and texting and all the rest of it, so they can monitor you in real time and upgrade, as I say, the virtual you that they have in big super cray computers, where they can put their tests out and see, well, what will Johnny do in this position or that position? What will he do? And they're generally right, as I say. All kinds of stress tests and so on that your virtual you is put under. They're pretty well on the ball. That's the kind of world they're bringing in. Someone asked last week about it too, about the cell phones and buses and so on. And what I'm saying is that with the cameras, etc., everywhere, that's all part of training you that this is going to be forever. The surveillance society is to be forever. And the war of terror, or war on terror, I call it war of terror because they always have a war of terror when they have the next part of the revolutions, has to train you for as long as it takes, and it'll be forever, I think, ongoing, that you are always under surveillance, and you will behave differently when you are under surveillance. You cannot be spontaneous. And what they do too is, as you're traveling in buses or trains or whatever, and you're chatting on your phone, that's all done in real time. They know exactly where you are. They'll know why you're going there, by the way. They'll know who you're going to see. They'll pretty well predict what you're going to talk about, and so on. Because everyone, as I say, is a variable. Maybe a little knock on the head or a little fall might wake you up a bit, and you'll start behaving erratically, and then they must use the knowledge they have on you to try and get you back under control. That's how terrified they are of someone that might get an idea. All technology, of course, with private enterprise, with the big international corporations, are on board with this big agenda. Every single one of them. I've gone through the list before where IBM calls its big meetings, and any corporation that's any kind of big corporation is right there with them, on board with them. I've given up their links and their sites and so on to show you who all these corporations are and what they do. And it's pretty well, these are corporations really run every aspect of your life, right down to your food supply, everything. That's what it's about. You understand that if you want to conquer people, you must make them helpless, technically, without them knowing it. Most folk think they can always go to that grocery store and pick as much of that stuff that they eat whenever they want it. They think that will always be like that, even though the big boys themselves have said they're now in the process of doing what Karl Marx said they'd do, which is a redistribution of wealth. That's taking your money, robbing you, to put to international corporations that will base themselves in third world countries. And as I say, you've got to be very predictable in how you'll manage that or accept that. And most folk, again, as in all ages, we accept whatever the master does. Russell said too that this dictatorship that would come in, he said he would go along with it if it was a scientific dictatorship. He said it will be horrible, it will be ruthless on the general public, but it must be so. And he was all for it. Because he helped plan a lot of what you're going through today. He and many others like him in big think tanks that worked with people from all kinds of departments of society to bring in what they call the big society, the world society, run with scientific supervision and really a conveyor belt system from birth to the grave. That's what he was talking about. And that's what we're going through today. Now here's IBM today. In fact, it says transportation for your cars, and their smart cars are coming out. It says, the next time you're stuck in traffic, think about this. As smart as our cars have become, our roadways are about to get a whole lot smarter. I remember talking about this years ago when I saw posts getting put in along some of the highways every 100, 200 yards with little devices on them. I thought, well, that's for tracking, obviously. Then I found out, of course, not only had the cars been had got these little tracking boxes in them, they also had embedded chips in the tires themselves. The manufacturers did it. They've done that for quite a few years. Anyway, it says building new roads and new lanes often just isn't possible any longer, but building intelligence into the roads and the cars with roadside sensors, radio frequency tags and global positioning systems certainly is. In Stockholm, a new smart toll system has reduced traffic congestion and carbon emissions. They all get on the bandwagon because they're all working together for the same goal. So carbon emissions by impressive percentages. That means they've taken a lot of cars off the road or dissuaded people from driving. That's what that means. Not because it's great technology. Technology has many different purposes, and part of it can be to oppress you until you just get off the road. But they got into all the different things they can do. And they're all working with the Internet of Things on this site. I'll leave it for you. There's a lot of videos they have up there from the IBM site itself, and you can see what they're up to, at least what they want to tell you they're up to right now. Whenever they tell you they're up to something and they show you videos on it, they've already got it. What's to come, they won't tell you at the time. And what's coming next year, they won't tell you at the time, at least most of it. Maybe 1% will tell you. But it's got a whole bunch of things, and they're working in different countries worldwide. This is a worldwide project. And of course, everything will be linked to central computers for the planet. That's what this is all about. Now, part of it too is the re-engineering of society. I read an article last week again from Bertrand Russell, and I gave a quote where he talked about needles, injections, and injunctions, he said, well, actually, that's the music coming in, so I'll be back with the rest of this after this break. Hi folks, we're back and we're cutting through the matrix. I mentioned a quote just before we're off the air there, from Bertrand Russell, where he said that diet, injections and injunctions he meant also obviously coupled with psychological indoctrination, but he said that would produce the perfect citizen that the oligarchies or the ruling class wanted. And I think personally this has been done. Lots of them were involved to do with injections, inoculations, to find ways of targeting specific parts of the brain that what they called stopped world peace from coming in. This part of the brain that made you, that made you upset at times when something went wrong or someone was oppressing you. They wanted to eradicate that part of the brain. And I think they've done it with a lot of people, to be honest with you. Which means, of course, that the military-industrial complex, of course it did. It had the big pharma on board from the beginning, the very beginning. And you'll find the same people who own the big shares in big pharma are the same ones who own the big shares in everything else across the planet. There's not that many of them. And the big shares I'm talking about, including your food supply, regardless of the company they talk about investing in. There's only 5 big agri-food businesses out there. There's callers there. There's Tassa from Toronto. Are you there, Tassa?
Oh, hi, Alan.
Yes.
So I live here in Toronto, and they have cameras up in all the buses and streetcars. I did some research, and as far as I can tell, I'm looking at a document from the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, and they actually do facial recognition. And I wondered if you had any comments on that.
It's the same as Britain and everywhere else. We're going into a total observation society worldwide. And all it is to train you to accept them. You've been trained to accept them, and you've been trained to modify your behavior, because they know that when you're on camera, you'll never behave the same way naturally. You're not spontaneous, etc. And you're being trained, and you're training yourself because you're conscious of them as well. That you'll always be watched. And this is going to go a lot further than just on street corners and on streets and stores and in buses and so on. It's going to be inside your home as well. They want us. An article came out in the 1960s from the World Psychologists meeting they had put out by the American Psychiatric Association or Psychological Association, and they said eventually they want cameras in every person's home. This is an old idea. Again, Orwell had it in his 1984 book, where you'd be watched everywhere you go in your own home. You have computers now with cameras on them. You have laptops that you have to tape over if you don't want to be watched. And we're being trained all the time that we're nothing. We're just. This is all behavior modification, and you take part in it. You participate in your own modification by allowing these cameras to be there. The Commissioner of Canada for Privacy and Britain and Australia and New Zealand, they all have them, and they'll all tell you that they're all supposed to legally warn you, but they have no powers to prevent it. Yeah.
And how do you think they're going to get cameras in people's houses?
They've already done it in Britain. They select certain areas, and if they say you're maybe perhaps, or someone neighbour complains, or supposedly someone did complain about you, and they'll never tell if they did or not. They can put cameras in your home to watch you, especially. This is how they first introduced the idea to prevent child abuse, to ensure that it's good parenting and so on. And this is all part of it. That's how they first brought it in. And then they started bringing it in with school laptops, where the children take the school laptops home. They've already admitted, I've done these articles a year ago, where they were observing children at home as covertly, not telling them that they were being monitored and videoed from their own homes by these laptops that were provided through the schools. And they're doing the same everywhere else too. Everyone's been trained in different areas without even thinking about it. Most of them don't even think about it anymore. They just accept it. Yeah.
And the cameras in the buses, are they going to use that against the people? Like, are they going to say, I don't know?
Oh, they're going to make sure, because eventually everyone's going to get questioned on their movements, their associations and so on. And they're also monitoring you too in real time, and they match that against your phone calls, your texting and so on, to see what groups you belong to, what clubs you go and visit, who you visit and all the rest of it. They can match all that together, where you were at a certain time. It's all put into big computers. Yeah.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks for calling. And Werner should call back maybe next Monday, hopefully. From Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, it's good night, and may your God or your gods go with you.